have here, I would say, most of our favorite people in the world. Bert's colleagues, our dear friends, his dear patients, our grandchildren, our children, my sister and brother-in-law, my cousins from all over the place, and friends from Sao Paulo, friends from Florida. It's very meaningful to us. So many years ago when Bert and I met, he told me that his passion was to give something back in medicine. That it wouldn't be enough for him to just be a good doctor, although he admires good doctors, but he wanted to find a way to give something back. And I think we can all agree he achieved that. So tonight we're very fortunate because one of the most talented gastroenterologists at Northwell, Dr. David Robbins, director of the GI program, is going to be our MC. He's very funny and he's very brilliant, so I turn it over to David.
Thank you very much. And I want to thank the members of the organizing committee, Anne, for inviting me to be the MC for this evening, and to extend our thanks and appreciation to Bert for everything that he's done on behalf of the Division of Gastroenterology and the Department of Medicine, and not only this Department of Medicine, but departments of medicine all around the world. So the way we thought we would structure this is by hearing from four representatives of different phases of Bert's life. And the way we arrived at our four speakers tonight was a very competitive process. We had over 400 applications, and we narrowed it down to a chosen few. So in true debate format, each speaker will be allotted 2 minutes, and Bert will have 60 seconds as a rebuttal. I will be moderating that in the spirit of our upcoming general election. So the format will start out, and I think we'll probably devolve into more tales because Bert is full of stories, and we thought this is a great opportunity for us to share many stories and memories. This, by the way, is the first of a series of receptions to honor Bert, so stay tuned. This is definitely not a retirement party per se. I'm sorry to tell you that, Anne. He's nowhere close to being finished. So let me start by introducing our first speaker, Ramona Rajapaksa. Will be telling us about her experience with Bert under his direction as fellowship director and as part of her life outside of 77th Street. Ramona is an associate professor of medicine and is the co-director of the inflammatory bowel disease program at the State University of New York at Stony Brook. So, Ramona, if you are ready, come on up and we pass the microphone over to you.
Hello, good evening. I prepared a little something, but it's very quick, I assure you. So, excuse me. Anne, thank you for inviting me and giving me the honor of saying a few words on behalf of some of the fellows. So I was trying to think of what to say and what to put together for this evening. We all know that Bert is a maestro in the field of gastroenterology. He has set many of us on our career paths, and the reason I'm an IBD specialist today is because of him. However, not everyone knows the side of him that his fellows do. And I wanted to give you a glimpse into how we know Bert and why we respect, love, and honor him, which is why there are so many fellows here this evening. My first introduction to Bert began with research, as it did for many of us. I dug into projects with him, but you know, in spite of that, Bert wasn't too keen on having me in the fellowship and had to be persuaded by Ira Hoffman. So thus began what I consider a true apprenticeship. That's what we had. Every morning, 7 in the morning, we fellows would wait for Bert in the foyer of Lennox Hill. We would stand opposite the entrance watching for him. We had to be there before him, and sometimes I would run all the way down Lexington Avenue so as not to be late. Did you know that, Bert? He never scolded us, but we were eager for his approval. That is the kind of effect he had on us. He would stride in, briefcase in hand, always full of vim and vigor and enthusiasm for the day. We rounded for a couple of hours every day with him, 5 days a week, for 3 years. This happened every single day, 5 days a week, 3 years. And we learned a lot during those rounds. Not only did we learn the finer nuances of IBD management from a master, but we also learned important life lessons, and such as time management, respect, loyalty, a positive approach to life, always seeing the bright side. During rounds, he would mischievously put us on the spot with trivia. A favorite was, "Do you know what day it is?" We would look at each other scrambling in confusion, and of course had no clue it was D-Day in Normandy decades ago or whatever. Do you remember that? I still haven't gotten around to reading the New York Times every morning, even though you told me I should get into the habit many years ago. As a chief, Bert was a firm and relentless taskmaster, but he was also kind. We were his charges, and he was utterly loyal and generous with us in every way. He literally invited us into his family and knew us all better than most spouses of chiefs ever did. We fellows would receive a big box of fruit from some faraway orchard every Christmas, and Anne and Bert would take us to dinner at their club at the Lotus Club. Bert has also always been ahead of his time, not only in medicine and IBD, but also in sociopolitics. I remember, this is a very personal story, I remember how I approached him as a third-year fellow about wanting to start a family. That was at a time when women's issues in medicine were not given less prominence, especially in gastroenterology, which was a very male-dominated field. Not anymore, but at the time it was. I went to his office, and with great trepidation, I started my conversation with him, and I said, "I'm not a spring chicken, you know, Bert." I was 30 at the time. And I heard him suppress a chuckle. The humor in it only became apparent to me as I became older. It's all relative, I understand that. Anyway, I asked to be excused from the RCPs and have more flexibility in my schedule, and he not only agreed to my request, but he set me up on a path of friendship with Anne and Nina, two of the women in his life, since I was now talking babies. And I'll never forget it because it meant a great deal to me. After I graduated and moved to Stony Brook with my husband Rohan, he and Anne continued to follow my progress, always there to lend a helping hand, offer advice about career, child rearing, schools, anything. They have personally kept in touch with many of our fellows, and in some ways we're sort of like a big family, as you can see from this gathering today. You'd think that with everything that Bert does in medicine that he would have no time for anything else, but I wonder if all of you know that he's an avid collector of pre-Columbian art. He loves trees. He loves to putter around on his tractor and travel the world. He collects stamps. And he can chat for hours about all kinds of things. He's actually a pretty interesting guy. Bert, you are a one-of-a-kind, inspiring person who has touched the lives of many. We love you. I personally want to thank you for everything you have done for me. I feel very honored to have you and Anne in my life, and I wish you and Anne an abundance of happiness, good health, and many years of intellectual adventure. Thank you.
The only member of tonight's panel that has been at Lennox Hill from the very beginning and has stayed here. Peter is a former program director of the GI training program and former associate chief of the division. He's currently the president of Manhattan Endoscopy, and Peter too has trained generations of young physicians and remains very, very active at Lenox Hill. And I think, Peter, you have a few stories you want to share from your days with Bert, so can't wait to hear that.
Well, first of all, I notice on the sign that we are in the Einhorn Auditorium. So does everybody know who Max Einhorn is? I know, Bert. I know you do. Why? Because he's a historian and gastroenterology. So Max is, or was, a pioneer in gastroenterology, and he founded the string test. And that was the first attempt at discovering pathology in the GI tract. And everybody knows where we're at today with all the endoscopic techniques that we have to discover pathology. So here we are. It's certainly fitting that we should be in this room honoring another pioneer, Bert Korelitz. So I'd like to give you my personal story, and frankly, I think I'm listening to Ramona's story, and it's so common that we have a thread of things that, that we're going to say tonight. And it makes sense, because Bert, that's who you are and what you mean to me and what you have meant to the other fellows in the room and some of the fellows who are not here. So I want to try to connect some of the dots with respect to some of the speakers that we will hear from tonight and how we might all be related. So Ramona was a fellow under Bert and actually even under me. Okay. So as we go through this reverse chronology, I want to tell you about how it all started for me. So I was a medical student at Mount Sinai, and you'll hear from one of the other speakers tonight, David Sacker, who was my guidance monitor during my clinical years. And David taught me everything I wanted to know about being an astute clinician and diagnostician. But there was one piece of advice that he gave me as I was trying to decide where I should go for my internship and residency. And he said, Peter, I think you should go to Lenox Hill Hospital. I think that's a perfect opportunity for you. You knew I wanted gastroenterology, and you said, there's a person there who's amazing. His name is Bert Korelitz. And if you can get to know Bert, I think you're just going to have a great time. So, David, thank you so much for giving me that advice. And I followed it. A couple of years later, I began my internship at Lenox, right here, and that was 1978. And in my first month of internship, I recall you as well. It was on the neurology service, okay? And one of my first patients that I had was a young woman with Crohn's disease who had a stroke. Why would she be on the neurology center? So here I am, my first month, and I'm dealing with a GI case, IBD, with a CVA. Now I know that with this case, I'm going to see someone by the name of Bert Korelitz, who's going to be called in for a consultation. And I knew that all I wanted was one day to become a gastroenterologist. So I prepared myself because I knew that during rounds, Dr. K would be coming down, and truth be told, there he was, tall, distinguished, white hair back then as well, okay? You were kind of like floating down the hall there with your entourage of doctors, interns, and whatnot. And you said, so what do we have here? And I said, well, Bert, Dr. Korelitz, I said, we have et cetera, and I presented this case to you with respect to the association of Crohn's disease, coagulopathy, CVA. I gave you everything I had to impress you. I don't think I impressed you. In any event, that was our first meeting. Not so long after that, it was time to decide about fellowship. maybe a year later. So I made my appointment to have an interview with Burton. And we sat down, and he listened to my story and the reasons why I wanted to be a gastroenterologist. And he said, you know, Peter, he said, this is a very competitive program. Didn't you say that to Ramona as well? I heard Ramona say that to me. He said that to me too. He says, we only take the cream of the crop. He says, and I don't know, honestly, but I'm glad you're applying. Leave your application there, we'll let you know. So, having done that, a few months later, I received my letter in the mail. Dr. Bialko, we are proud to have you as our fellow. I later found out, Bert, that I am the 3rd GI fellow under your reign here as Director of Gastroenterology. Our 2nd GI fellow is here tonight. Bruce, where are you? There he is. Bruce Gaffey's here. And Bruce and I, we just had a fantastic time during our fellowship with Bert. There's so many things that Bert has taught me that I'm grateful for, that I continue to utilize in my career. As I look back at it, Bert, I owe you a ton. You've taught me so many things with respect to how to act as a professional, how to deal with patients, how to be an administrator, how to be a researcher, how to package the whole thing together and still stand tall and feel absolutely great about everything that we were doing. So I thank you so much for all of those lessons that you gave me. One of the things I remember clearly is our research project. Now, Ramona mentioned research. And you have to understand, in those days, coming to Lenox Hill as a GI fellow, you had to do research. And Bert was the epitome of the researcher. The thing that amazed me the most was how he was able to manage a huge private practice of IBD, primarily. Very difficult cases many times. And dealing with research, which was, I think, his primary love. And he made sure that every fellow had an experience in research, whether they liked it or not. Okay? I liked it. I loved it. I mean, I frankly suffered through it many times with him. We would sit down for hours after hours in his office, okay, going over our data and writing and rewriting until he was satisfied. I thought I had it the first time, the second time, the third time. We went through it many times before Bert finally said, okay, this is it. And then the highlight, I understand you just got back from Vegas. I just got back from Vegas as well at the ACG meeting. Sorry we didn't catch up. I didn't even know you were there. But as I sat there, I was recalling my experience as a fellow presenting a paper that we did together on pregnancy. I mean, I was horrified about having to get up in front of this crowd and presenting the paper. But Bert was there, calmed me down, and said, just do what you know how to do, okay? And we presented a beautiful paper. We won a prize for that particular paper that year. And it's something I'll never forget. It catapulted me to continue research with you, without you, on different kinds of projects, and actually just put a different scope on my career. That's, again, I thank you for that. Going forward, we continued our relationship not only on the clinical side, but on the administrative side. Bert, as you know, you've been told, he was the chief of GI, and I would say I was your right-hand person, right? Pretty much right out of my fellowship until a few years ago, where we relinquished those roles. But again, you know, he taught me how to manage my own practice and administration, instruction to our fellows. I later became program director because of Bert, and I enjoyed that role immensely. And now here I am in my own practice. Not too long ago, in June, I think it was, Bert gave a talk. I don't know if it was your last talk as a practicing physician or not, but some of you folks in this room may have heard it. You know, it was about the history of inflammatory bowel disease research a la Bert Korelitz. And basically, you know, he reviewed all of the work that he did with many of the fellows, you know, that are in this room. And I've got to tell you, and I think Ramona said the same thing, Bert always, no matter where he went or no matter where we went, he always recognized the people that he worked with, the fellows. We shared the projects together. He would always put our name ahead of his. And even on this conference in June, I'm going to share with you what he said about me. And basically he said, and one of my favorite doctors who shared research with me is in this room, and he did this paper on pregnancy and inflammatory bowel disease. And here I am, I'm sitting there listening to him talking about me when he is like a giant in my eyes, and he's giving me recognition. So this is Bert, this is the way he's always been. He's taken care of and has recognized all of his fellows. Again, when I would go to one of those meetings and people would ask me, where are you from? And I said, you know, Lenox Hill. And they would say, oh, Bert Korelitz? And I'd say yes. And then they would say, Jerry Way? And I'd say yes. I mean, there is no one more fortunate than myself in terms of GI training to have had David Sacker, Jerry Way, and Bert Korelitz as my mentors. And I thank you all. But Bert, I thank you the most. Thank you very much.
Major GI organization, I'm not going to list them. But I'm looking forward to what will surely be many exciting tales, because you're never boring, Jerry. It's great to see you.
It's great to be here among friends. It seems, looking around the room, I've trained half the people that are here, including Bert. Bert was a great student. He learned how to do colonoscopy, and fortunately for the future and the past of IBD, he's colonoscoped everybody in New York, at least once, and taken lots of biopsies, and he certainly has set the field of IBD right by all of us and by Korelitz. But I see Bert differently than everybody else. Bert is one of my good friends, and I see Bert as a devoted father, a devoted husband, a family man who dotes on his family all the time. He loves his family, and his family loves him, of course. And it's so much fun to get together with the Korelitzes and discuss things other than inflammatory bowel disease. But here, you've heard of inflammatory bowel disease up the kazoo. But you know what the kazoo. So, but I'd like to take you way back when I was a fellow in gastroenterology. Bert had just come down from Boston with his thick Boston accent. We would make rounds, and Bert would be there extolling the virtues of treatment for IBD, and everybody would listen to him very adroitly, trying to soak up some knowledge from a different source, which was the Boston view of IBD rather than the Mount Sinai view of IBD. And everybody at Mount Sinai said, what do they know from IBD in Boston? But Burt showed us what IBD is all about in Boston and in New York. But I'd like to take you out of Lenox Hill. I'd like to talk to you about a little known aspect that very few people are aware of. And that is the American College of Gastroenterology. Burt was the president of the American College of Gastroenterology back, I think, in 1979, 78, 79. The American College of Gastroenterology was one of the GI organizations. There were 3 GI organizations: the ACG, the American College of Gastroenterology, the AGA, the American Gastroenterological Association, and the ASGE, the American Society for Gastrointestinal Endoscopy. And Burt was president of the ACG. Now, the ACG was minor compared to the AGA. The AGA was the academic excellence, and the ACG was sort of a stepchild for gastroenterology. Everybody derided them. In fact, at one of the meetings, one of the AGA presidents got up and said, the ACG is a bunch of internists who were pretending to be gastroenterologists. I mean, it was a sore point. Because the ACG was small, unfortunately, the ACG was run by a man who took advantage of the ACG. He was the manager of the ACG, and he would take vacations, well, not vacations, but before the ACG meetings, we always had a pre-program and a post-program. And the pre-program would be someplace, a nice resort. The post-program would be a different nice resort. And our manager used to go to both of them beforehand to make sure that they were appropriate for ACG. So he would go visit one, he'd go visit the other. And it turns out that one day, one evening, what happened at these ACG meetings was the manager would bring a whole stack of applications for the ACG. And we would have dinner. The governing board would meet for dinner. We'd have dinner maybe 6 o'clock with wine, cocktails, a nice dinner. Afterward, we'd have after-dinner drinks. And then he'd bring out this list, the folders of applicants for ACG. And there'd be really rabid discussions about whether this one should be a fellow or not be a fellow. Maybe they should postpone for 2 years until he got some more training. And so that would go on for a couple hours. We'd be arguing among ourselves about who should be a fellow. Then after that, we'd have a meeting. You'd pass out a one-page piece of paper with all the statistics for the year. How much money came in from applications, how much money came in from all the things we did. And one of the things is that we made no money from the exhibition hall at the main ACG. No money. And we also made no money from the journal. So this got to Burt. Burt found out about it, and together with his pre-president and his post-president, which was Dick Farmer and Sid Winnower, they got together and actually were able to get the ACG out of the grips of this manager who, one night, around midnight, the guys would drift off. There'd only be a few people left in the room. One night, he got himself elected chairman and manager of the ACG for life. At the next meeting, I announced this, that, do you know that last meeting, last year, he was elected chairman for life? And one of the guys stood up and said, that's not true, that didn't happen. So I said, it happened. He said, I've got the minutes of the last meeting in my room, I'm going to go up and get them. So he disappeared. A few minutes later, he came back, ashen. He was white. He said, you're right, Jerry. He got himself elected president for life, with a salary and all of the for life. So Bert was able to enlist the aid of one of the major litigating attorneys in New York at the time, who was a friend of Bert's, named Lyman. And together, over many, many hours of testimony and lots of money changing hands to pay the manager off, they were able to get rid of him. And now the ACG today is a formidable body of gastroenterology. Bert changed the entire tenor of the ACG from a small mom-and-pop organization to a major player in the world of gastroenterology. So I think, and Bert just this year, last week, received an award from the ACG for the work that he did 30 years ago. So Bert, congratulations.
It's your turn. Light it up.
I promised I wouldn't speak for too long. Closer. First of all, I want to thank Lenox Hill for giving me such a wonderful reception. There are administrative people at Lenox Hill who have been devoted to me for many years. They include Jean Fitzpatrick, who's here with us tonight, and Janice Coleman, who served as my executive secretary for many years. And currently, I have people like Gus Costellas, who enthusiastically supported this reception, and Elisa Petro, who moved away as administrator and now has been replaced by Jill Quinn, who's very much responsible for the success of this evening. Jill, thank you very much. I'm going to share with you a few anecdotes. Back to the beginning, it started with family. When I was a little boy, I had an uncle with subacute bacterial endocarditis. He changed his specialty from English and government and went into medicine because of his own disease. And he described every day of his disease until the time he died in his last year of Harvard Medical School. My uncle Alfred was 24 when he died. I was 5 years old. But I inherited that kind of background and was always motivated to go into medicine. I'll always be grateful to his mother, my grandmother, Lena, and Uncle Alfred for that inspiration, because medicine has meant so much to me. I've had wonderful teachers all along the line, and I would like to share with you just a couple of quotations that I got from a few of them. There are many. My professor of medicine at BU Medical School was Chester Keefer. And Dr. Keefer said, "Let the patient talk, doctor, and he will give you the diagnosis." Never forgot it. And I like to think that I transmitted that to others as well. Dr. Banks was my mentor in gastroenterology at the Beth Israel in Boston. And when I was struggling to decide whether I would aim toward Boston or to New York, he said to me very simply, "There are many roads to Rome." It was very meaningful to me. I met Dr. Janowitz at Mount Sinai after the decision to stay at Mount Sinai. He was a brilliant man. I found that he and I somehow or other were competitive, which I had never intended. And as I approached a move to Lenox Hill, he said to me, "Bert, do you think you will get along without Mount Sinai?" And I said to him, "Henry, thank you very much. That's just what I needed." I have many old friends tonight with me. Some are doctors, some are not doctors. I'm very fortunate to have both. Ted Bayless came up from Baltimore to be with me tonight. Nat Wish is here. Mike Bruno made us chiefs of our services on the same day, many years ago. And he's been a wonderful friend and colleague all these years. I very much miss one man who is no longer with us, Dan Present. He was first also my student, and then we became collaborators as well as dear friends. We spent evenings spreading graph paper on the floor of the living room doing our research. And that is what led up to the paper that David mentioned, the use of 6-mercaptopurine in the treatment of Crohn's disease. Peter Rubin is here with me tonight. We're old friends from Mount Sinai. My relationship with Mount Sinai has remained dear to me all these years, despite the fact that my focus and concentration has been on Lenox Hill. Barry Salty is here with me tonight, master surgeon, wonderful man. I get mixed up when I call or try to classify my students and my friends and my colleagues, because so many of them have become colleagues after being students, as well as dear friends. You heard from 4 of them tonight. Ramona is the one who encouraged me to start a database. Ramona, do you realize what's come out of that database since you started us? It's been wonderful and very productive. Peter Biocco is being very modest when he says that I'm giving him credit for the paper that we did together on pregnancy and IBD. I assure you that he was the first one to recognize that it was active disease, active Crohn's disease, that led to a poor prognosis during pregnancy. It had not been mentioned by anybody up until that time. Our goal in the paper was to find out what the drugs did to the pregnancy and the delivery and the births. But Peter recognized it was active disease during pregnancy that led to a poor prognosis, at least in Crohn's disease. Peter was a wonderful fellow. They hardly come any better, and I've always been very proud of him. Jerry, as he told you, came from the same medical school that I did. I think it was about 5 years difference that he was behind me. I didn't know him then. He went from MIT, decided to go into medicine, went to BU School of Medicine, and ends up at Mount Sinai, the same place I went to. And then Dr. Janowitz saw fit to assign us to gastroenterology rounds together for about 4 consecutive years. And that was the time of onset of endoscopy, so that I could be the clinician and he could be the endoscopist, and we would come up with combined recommendations. Those were wonderful times, Jerry. So much pleasure they gave me. And of course, we have remained friends all of these years. As he said, he followed me as president of the American College of Gastroenterology. I influenced Dr. Fye, who was my predecessor, another wonderful man, by the way, who used to find time to stop in the corridors of Leonard Hill Hospital and talk with everybody, and made it seem as if he had all the time in the world to do so. I learned so much. I learned so much from his doing that. Jerry, of course, has gone on to be one of the greatest GI endoscopists in the world. And he has taught generations of endoscopists already how to do colonoscopies and do them well. David Sacker really is the epitome of what he touched on. Started as a student when he came to Mount Sinai. Then he became the first academic chief of gastroenterology at Mount Sinai. Dr. Janowitz was not an academic. At the end or middle of the day, he would go to his private office. David was the first academic gastroenterologist, chief of gastroenterology. We became friends, we remained friends ever since, and probably has taught me as much in gastroenterology as anybody else has. I just want to mention one other thing about David. David, you know, was the first chairman, the first American chairman of the International Organization of Inflammatory Bowel Disease. And subsequently, I have two friends here tonight. Jean-Fred Colombel, who's now the head of the Feinstein Institute at Mount Sinai, who also was chairman of the IOIBD. And the current chairman is Bruce Sands, who now is the chief of gastroenterology at Mount Sinai. So you see, as the years go on, the threads continue, and these are very important people in my life who I consider dear friends and I admire. Dave Robbins, I consider one of my new friends. It's only about 10 years. I know it isn't very long compared to some of the others. And Dave Robbins, like one of my former fellows, Mark Fleischer, sitting over here, is a very funny man. And you know, it's so important in what we do to have people with that kind of humor who can say to you on the telephone, Dave, I don't want to disturb you. What are you doing right now? He said, I'm saving lives. That's typical Dave Robbins. I'm very grateful to Julie Schneider, who has been my database technician for many years, and I'm very sorry that she can't be with us tonight. The nurses from the infusion center and the endoscopy center are my friends. They're terrific, but they're also wonderful friends. They're my buddies. I'm very fortunate. I have a few patients here tonight. I couldn't invite all of them. Patient care in medicine is such a reward, not only in addition to helping them medically, but having them become friends and caring about them while you're helping them. And I certainly have had my share of that. All my former fellows who are here tonight, thank you for being with me. My family, I have two wonderful daughters, Nina and Jean. I have two wonderful sons-in-law, Robin and Paul. I have 4 grandchildren. One of them is the movie director sitting over there. Dorothy, I hope you're still here, Dorothy. And also Asher. I have also many in-laws and cousins who are here with me tonight. A wonderful family. I always wanted one of my relatives to be a doctor. And I do have one niece who's a pediatrician in Philadelphia. But most of all, and come. I gotta tell you, just about 65 years ago, I was introduced to a girl with an interesting face. That girl is Anne, who is still the most beautiful woman I've ever. She has provided me with a quality of life that I could not be improved upon, and much more than I have ever hoped for. So thank you all for coming, my friends and students.